Ever since 2016, this channel has been following a specific direction, that is, spotlighting who's behind Eastern or Western animated media, either by making AMVs, which made me YouTube's enemy, or by scripted video formats. However, in this case, I'm going to make an exception since we're not talking about the who, but more about how you can identify some specific names. I suppose this kind of content might be well received since somebody asked for an animation ID kind of course a few days ago, so I thought, why not? After a while, it seems like fair and square to let you know my own method, which isn't 100% infallible, but might help you out by following a few simple tips. And if you think I'm not the right guy for such a task, you're absolutely correct, since my most viewed videos are pretty flawed, but those belong to the past, as we have to learn from our sins, and so did I. So without further ado, let's see how this goes. First of all, identifying single animators requires a lot, I mean a whole lot of time and patience. And it's not unusual to run up against mistakes because nobody's flawless. And it's not even so uncommon to remain confused upon spotting two similar animators. That also happens. For the record, maybe back in 2013 I was thinking of giving in, because I didn't know where to begin, and back then I could only absorb understandings from K17's AMVs, which were like oases for my ignorance desert. Of course they were not exempt from mistakes either, but there was no other way, since I remember typing a specific name on Google, even in Japanese, and the only useful results were guarded in Kanzentai forums. This is where I began my nosy career. Back in July 2016, I wrote an animation thread, in the wrong section yet, which was a mixed bag. I mean, just read this shit. Anyway, one piece of advice would be always to check credits for any kind of animated media, which explain in detail which people worked on a specific medium. In the case of Dragon Ball, Kansenshu is the quintessential website. You can find any credit you need therein. Little warning though, I'd still suggest you not to fully trust the number of animators, because it might happen that an extra name appeared uncredited. Why? Maybe for not exceeding a certain cap, so you gotta be careful. Second, you should start with familiar names first, who are generally easier to ID, so that we can follow the next tip, mental associations, which is by far the most important advice you have to consider, as it consists of timing, effects and details. Even the silliest details do make a difference. Let's put this theory into practice, by trying to ID a familiar name. In this case, Masahiro Shimanuki. I want to know whether he appeared in episode 103, so let's check its credits to verify his presence. And here he is. Now then, how do you find him? What do you generally link him to? Well, Shimanuki is linked to spiky smoke, debris, dramatic action lines, shaky muscles, rigid poses, Mickey Mouse hands and distinctive character art. Therefore, his work should contain at least two or more of these clues, so let's see which scene is closer to his creed. This one seems like the right choice, since it showcases most of the aforementioned details. The following step would be memorizing the animator's main quirks and use them as a comparison with another scene afterwards. Let's give another example, always with Shimanuki, but in episode 87. As you can read, he's credited as a supervisor, but his name doesn't appear in the key animation credits. However, this brings up another tip, context, which sometimes can help you find answers by applying mere logic, as he's a Shigasha regular in this case, so he has to be there. Once again, you should not blindly trust the amount of people credited, especially when it comes to more familiar names. Let's try with another name, Naotoshi Shida. Which quirks make him stand out? The blossoming fluffy smoke, the wormy fingers, the detailed ears, the feline scratches, the Uchiyama-esque swallow wings, and the frenzy waltz-like pacing. This technique also works with his pre-2007 stuff, as long as you spot at least two or more details to confirm his actual identity, and then memorize it. Just take on the main guys first, especially those who became supervisors, so you get to know them more, and then the less common names. For example, I want to understand Tomoya Ida better, so what should I do? If you already learned to tell apart Ibizawa and Kanno, you only have to act by elimination. Then what about Yoko Izuka? just excluding the big names isn't sufficient in this case, since there will be another one in excess. Searching for the episodes she is in individually would sound like a very tedious procedure, but fortunately there is a quicker way. Uncorrected Gengas, which are going to solve your doubts by default. By now the internet has lots and lots of Gengas, Dogas and layouts scattered everywhere, including Twitter, which result in being such fascinating means of learning, because you get to learn one's real artwork and handwriting too. So, upon discovering Izuka's Gengas, we can deduce she tends to draw chains like upside down hills, and is probably not as strong as Shimanuki or Izada animation wise. With production material available, you sometimes encounter some uncredited names that you would never expect to see, like Kenta Kaze on a few episodes of the Cell games, or Shida handling the memorable Trunks cutting Frieza in half moment, which we all used to believe it was Nakatsuru scene or whatever, up until early 2018, in which a user asked him why he joined Studio Junior and Shindo Pro after 159, and Shida casually mentioned that scene. Really mind-blowing. Nevertheless, how are you supposed to spot uncredited names without available Gengas? It may be possible as long as it's a very familiar name. A name you can hardly miss, like Katsuyoshi Nakatsuru, who pops up uncredited in several episodes. Therefore, also considering his overexposure in the Buu arc and in GT model sheets, this definitely facilitates our purpose quite a bit. 3/4, geometrical perspective, dramatic and conceited character acting, upright ears and bubbly smoke. Just be careful with this tip. Stick to very familiar names only. Next up, a relevant question. What if an animator is overwhelmed by other people's corrections? Like on Super, in which cuts are redrawn by the supervisor, the chief animation supervisor, and or by the second key animators, exhibiting atavistic production issues we are all aware of by now. Once again, you should stick to familiar names only, because otherwise it would be a rather confusing research, which I also want to avoid. For example, Hit borrowing Goku's life in episode 71 showcases heavy corrections by both Shimanuki and Yamamuro, yet this doesn't look like an average Shimanuki cut. The way Super Saiyan Blue aura dissolves and that FT smoke resemble Kenji Miyuma's main quirks way more, further confirmed by his uncorrected art in one shot. Searching frame by frame is actually something I used to do in the past, but nowadays I wouldn't recommend it as much as spotting effects and details, which can help you out whenever the situation becomes a bit tricky. The frame by frame method, on the other hand, just keep it as a last resort. One final question. Do mental associations work anytime, regardless of one's nationality? That always depends on how much an artist is recognizable, but without an insightful website like Kansenshu, I'd suggest you to pay attention to credits and information tenfold, because websites like IMDb don't always get animation credits right when the animated medium doesn't include them. For example, if you want to dissect a Pluto cartoon, just stay away from it, because everything looks exactly the same. Unless you find some useful drafts elsewhere, like in cartoonresearch.com, or you want to ID a famous name like Milt Kahl or Emery Hawkins, Disney will inevitably drive you insane. The Warner shorts, conversely, are normally more doable. As usual, start with more notorious animators like Rob Scribner, Belger Ross or Ken Harris, whose traits are nearly unmistakable and hard to miss. Moreover, their corresponding production numbers can help you contextualize which specific animators were part of a specific director. Concrete example, Art Davis' filmography, thanks to which it's easier to separate shorts with John Kerry from those with Emery Hawkins. Again, because the amount of credited names isn't completely trustworthy. Small digression, the Warner Brothers dissection is coming back next week. We're getting to warmer spots, so be sure not to miss it. Lastly, 2 more tips. Please don't bother animators in question on their social profiles, because not every user knows Japanese like I do, and most of all, you'll never be able to predict the interlocutor's reaction. Instead, you can create compilations or collect screenshots of a name in particular as a mere reminder. I hope these few tricks will be enough to erase your uncertainties. I do realize IDing single animators is a quite complicated task that requires experience and huge patience, and the method I illustrated might not be error-proof, but I tried to facilitate things nonetheless. Take it as a suggestion by someone who's been a nosy geek for years, either that or a wizard. I'll take it.
you.